What's going on, everybody? It's your host, Moose. Episode 11 of the Thunderdome Puckcast coming right at you. We're going to talk to the Pacific Division in depth today for a few minutes. Going to finally recap that All-Star Game weekend. Great action happening in the game, skills competition, and of course the 3-on-3 women's kind of rivalry series getting off between U.S. and Canada. We'll recap that. Bolts Week in Review, 4-game week for them coming off of their bye week in the All-Star break. NHL Hot or Not, we'll go over some of our players and teams that are shooting up the rankings or dropping down like a lead block in water. And then, of course, what's up next for our Bolts? Episode 11. Hit that intro. Welcome to episode 11 of the Thunderdome Podcast. It's your host, Moose, once again with the Sports Heap. Thunderdome Podcast, of course, our Tampa Bay Lightning and NHL-focused podcast of our vlog and podcast series. Catch any of our shows live or pre-recorded on YouTube, of course, at our channel, the Sports Heap. You'll be able to find, I think we're up to over 50 shows now among our 5 shows, so make sure to check us out on there. You can always watch me in the $10 Sports Man Cave. I guess we should rename it now, the Sports Heap Man Cave, here in Austin, Texas. Just missing my beloved Tampa Bay sports teams. A little bit of refurbishing or some renovation going on, getting rid of the carpet. Have nice laminate flooring once again, so I like the acoustics. I feel like we get a little bit of a authoritative voice, if you will, with a slight echo, moving around a few of my decorations. The lightning walls, it's off camera, it's off to your left here. Have my 2019-2020 lightning signed photograph, limited edition, giant lightning towel. Have my sports memorabilia cabinet with a lightning on the second tier here. And of course, Stanley Cup newspaper with Dave Anderchuk on it, and my ticket to Game 7 framed. And then soon to be added, I think most of the Tampa Bay Lightning team a few years ago, before Bishop got traded, so he had Brian Boyle's autograph on there. I'll have to show that one day. I got to get that framed and hung up as well for everyone here. So finally, the mess is gone, and us in the comments from family and friends and viewers like, man, why has your man cave been a mess for the past, 11 episodes, if you will? Some renovations going on, finally done. It's going to look a lot cleaner. You're not going to have a random ladder and whatnot lying around. So thank you for your patience with that. If you're a viewer on YouTube, if you're a listener on podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Thankfully, you didn't have to deal with the eyesore of the renovation, but it's all nice and clean here. So let's get going with our Pacific Division check-in. Probably the most competitive division so far, and still trying to figure out whether it's competition or maybe the teams are all mediocre. Getting my morning coffee in, of course. So let's take a look at those standings. Of course, leading the division right now, Vancouver with 65 points, which in most of the other divisions and conferences would potentially not even be in playoff position. If you're looking at the East, pretty sure that's not even good for playoff positioning. And here you are leading the Pacific Division. A little bit of beating up on each other by the Pacific Division teams right now. And again, first and fifth place right now within 4 points. So we'll put them up on the screen again if you're watching on YouTube. You'll have the luxury of taking a look. If not, follow along on your favorite internet browser. You're going to want to take a look at the standings here. Vancouver, and then Edmonton right behind them at 64, tied with the Golden Knights. So one win more than the Knights. We talked about Gerard Gallant's firing. Then, of course, the Calgary Flames at 62. They've been kind of cooling down as of late. And Arizona, who was leading the division a week or two ago, and they might have been leading the division or at least second when we did our last Pacific check-in. They kind of dropped down to fifth, and looking at wins, they might be just behind the Winnipeg Jets out of the Central for that last wildcard spot. I expect that to go to the wire. Winnipeg, of course, a little bit of injury trouble, some drama with Big Buff not wanting to play or wanting a trade or a new start. So they're going to be a little bit short-handed. They've got a plucky group of young and arguably underpaid players, especially on the defensive on the blue line. But we'll see what happens with Winnipeg. I fully expect the Coyotes to kind of jump back up in here. We'll look at some of the 5-on-5 statistics and how the team's been performing shortly. And I might throw my bold prediction of who's going to finish in the playoffs. Maybe at our next check-in, when's that? Probably episode 15 or 16, we may have a closer look at where we're at with the Pacific Division. I might throw my guess there. But again, right now, Vancouver, Edmonton, Vegas, Calgary now, and Arizona kind of fighting for a playoff spot. And honestly, the division lead, and then kind of in the basement, the Sharkies, unfortunately, not looking good. Their season of hell getting worse with Tomas Hertl out for the rest of the year, and then the Ducks of Kings have been kind of basement dwellers for most of the season. Let's look at some of this team statistics. Thanks to our partners at hockeyreference.com. Great repository of information. So we're looking here in terms of points in the NHL, and we've got the the Pacific teams highlighted. And you'll see most of them are gravitating towards the middle of the pack. And in fact, the first team, your Canucks, out of Vancouver, 13th in the league, and they're the number one representative for that division. So few of the teams gravitating towards the middle, the mean of the NHL. Again, I guess we have enough data at this point. Probably 52 games played in most cases to make determinations. Maybe these are just mediocre teams. And you're definitely seeing indications here of the Sharks, Ducks, and Kings towards the bottom of the standings, but kind of a big lump sum here, along with some other teams jockeying for playoff position. Panthers kind of in and out of playoff position on the eastern side of things. Let's look at goals for, which is, I like looking at goals for. Knights actually leading this with right there with the Canucks, and not surprisingly, the Oilers with McDavid and Draisaitl leading the way. A little bit of a drop-off here for Coyotes and Flames, where I think they're getting better goaltending, and kind of the reason why they're staying in the mix. Though this is really interesting. Flames in the mix, but they have a minus. Is that a minus 21 goal differential? That I did not realize that. So offense kind of tough here for the Flames. Goals against at 170. They're probably the lower end. Let's see where they gravitate when you look at goals against. Let's do it the other way here. So, yeah, you'll see the Flames kind of here towards the middle at 171. Vegas at 172, but again, they're at 179 for goals scored. So this always kind of begs the question of looking at expected goals and goals for and goals against, looking at analytics. So the expected goals for, Vegas was supposed to be leading the league in scoring, which is really, really interesting to me. So they're way below budget if you're looking from a budgeting standpoint. The actual goals for at 121 versus the 142 here. And I want to say those are going to be even strength goals when you're looking at actual goals for on 5-on-5. So this is 5-on-5 play. They were expecting 142 goals for, only getting the 121. And then their total, as we looked of here at 179. So maybe they were thinking they weren't going to be as strong as they have been on the power play. Where are they in terms of power play percentage? 20.89. I mean, that's respectable. It's probably going to be, 10th in the NHL. So I think the Vegas Golden Knights power play has been overperforming a bit, which is really interesting. But again, 5-on-5 play, especially as you get to the playoffs, going to be super important because most of your play is going to be at 5-on-5. Expected goals against is always interesting from a 5-on-5 standpoint. The LA Kings were only expected to give up 107, and they've really given up 117 on top of what they've given up the power play, which is some of their reasoning for lack of success this year. And they're also not getting the typical goaltending play from Jonathan Quick and his backup. Let's look at power play overall. Got him here ranked. Edmonton actually the number one ranked team in power play in the NHL, almost at 30%. Vancouver 8, Knights 10, and Calgary 20% here in 12. So they're actually 4 teams in the top half of the league. Coyotes kind of down here at 20, so hopefully that's not their downfall. Let's look at penalty kill. Sharks actually number one penalty killing team in the league. Kind of keeping them in things. I don't think they're going to make playoffs this year. About 10 points out right now. Edmonton, this is always great when you have a top 5 unit in both of your penalty kill, of your special teams. You're going to have a good time. So fully expect Edmonton to make the playoffs despite how close the division is. Edmonton, if they can get the goaltending, should win the division. Coyotes right a clip under 82%, and Calgary right there at number 12 at 81%. For special teams, there's your even strength goals for and for against. So we could do some comparison there. I like looking at Corsi and Fenwick data, though. I guess in terms of dominating the competition, it gives you some idea. But I think some of these teams maybe do well on the quick break, right? So maybe they're getting worked, or they're kind of underperforming in terms of Fenwick and Corsi metrics. Not dominating more than 50% of the game, but maybe they're great on the counterattack. And I think that's what we're seeing here in the Pacific Division. I'm curious to see where does Edmonton fall in this, because I think Edmonton actually is at when you're looking at the Corsi percentage, they're actually under 50% of puck control for the game, which makes sense. I think you're looking at some quick odd man rushes the other way, really leading to McDavid and Draisaitl's goals and assist leads for the league. And we'll look at individual players shortly. Same thing with looking at Fenwick. They're at 49.3 there. In fact, most of the teams are under the 50% mark on both metrics. Really, the Flames are kind of straddling at 50%. Everyone is below that. I think surprisingly, Vancouver is way down here, 47.8% among bottom 7 of the league in both of those metrics. And then again, we talked about possession quality, expected goals for on 5-on-5, and so on and so forth. I was like looking at those scoring chances for Golden Knights actually leading in total scoring chances, kind of capitalizing. They're looking at 56.4% of the scoring chances in team favor when you're comparing against their scoring chances against. So Golden Knights, I think, have shown some better play, surprisingly, after the firing of Gerard Gallant. I'd have to go back historically to see what the data looked like before, to see if we've really seen that boost with DeBauer coming on board with the Vegas Golden Knights. I'd probably put them in my top 3 for the division. Guess we'll check in on them next month. Let's look at individual players for the league. Let's look at our skaters. And, of course, the big points leader, Leon Draisaitl with the Edmonton Oilers at 85 points. And he's leading in assists with 54. Austin Matthews, actually, I didn't know, had 40 goals already with Alex Ovechkin. Tied at the top of the league. I want to say it's either Draisaitl or McDavid who are going to have your goal leads for the Pacific. Let's take a look at our skaters. And I'm pretty certain that's going to be the case. Yep. Well, they jumped past her. Yeah, there's Draisaitl with 31, 4th in the league. McDavid, I think, is 6th. Or tied. A big logjam for 6th in the league at 30, yeah. And I guess they're putting him at tied for 7th with Sebastian Aho out of Carolina. Assist we looked at as well. That was Draisaitl leading that and leading in total points. Minus 11, though, is really interesting for his plus minus. So him and McDavid at the top of the league. Then you got to go all the way down. Jeez, Peterson 20th in the league in terms of points. I think a surprise, though, has been JT Miller's play. Kind of a tough trade the Lightning had to do to make some cap space. Really would have loved to get that production this year, though you could argue that Killorn's game has risen to that level. Maybe Killorn's maybe not at 54 points or anything, but at least in the 20-goal category for the first time in his career. So definitely a pleasant surprise from Killorn, maybe replacing some of that productivity we were expecting from JT Miller. But happy to see him. I loved him. He was a fan favorite, I think. A couple blockbuster trades bringing him over with most of the New York Rangers over the past 5 years. So happy to see him playing well in Vancouver. Looking at goalies before we move on to our next topic. Billy, it's the Fleury, Rittich, and Markstrom's having a strong year for Vancouver, keeping them in the hunt. When you're looking at goals against average leaders and save percentage leaders, it's really been Fleury, Rittich, and Markstrom at a 9.14. I think Markstrom has in terms of save percentage. I think he has the lowest goals against average as well among the Pacific goalies. I think most of them are within 2.84 and 2.88. So getting the job done there. And again, surprise also, we talked about JT Miller. I think another surprise for the Vegas Golden Knights and a player who might be, maybe wanting to leave the limelight in Montreal was definitely Max Pacioretty. Patches, always a lightning killer in Montreal, doing well in Vegas. Happy to see him. I think he's at 24 goals. We talked about the second-year sensation, Elias Pettersson, with 23 goals leading the way for the Vancouver Canucks. So that's your Pacific Division in a nutshell. Let's hop over to All-Star Weekend. All-Star Weekend, I think it's really fun. I put it probably among the best All-Star competitions and games among the major 4 sports, I'd say. Pro Bowl's kind of a yawner sometimes. I think NBA All-Star Weekend's pretty good, and MLB has the pizzazz and the history of it, but ultimately it's just kind of All-Star Weekend, and you get into Home Run Derby, but I don't sit down and watch All-Star Weekend for MLB. I watch it for the NHL. I couldn't watch some of the games on Saturday night this year, unfortunately, but David Pastrnak winning the MVP for the tournament, even though the Atlantic had a tough loss to the Pacific, 5-4, close one there, but I think he had 5 points total, right? 2 goals, 3 assists, getting him the MVP award. And at that time, he was leading the league in goals. Since then, Of course, Ovechkin, he went to like back-to-back hat tricks or something like that. So scoring 15 goals over the past 2 weeks, and Austin Matthews doing really well as well to lead the league in goals. So love the games. I think what I really wanted to talk about a little bit was the skills competition and fastest skater Matthew Barzal, New York Islanders, kind of bringing it to the wire, finally unseating the defending champion Connor McDavid. I think 2 or 3 years in a row McDavid's won it, and Barzal just edging him out around the ice. So congratulations to him winning that. Save streak came down to Vasilevsky and hometown hero Jordan Binnington, with Binnington just pulling out ahead. Truly an amazing. I think Vasi made one of his patented behind the back saves, which you always love seeing. Jacob Slavin, again with the accuracy. Really some controversy. They went with a video board instead of our usual foam target or plastic targets, and it was malfunctioning like crazy. They had to change the plexiglass, I think, 2 or 3 times. That was in front of the monitor. I mean, if you haven't seen this, you need to go check this out on YouTube. The monitor just malfunctioning for the accuracy shooting. Hardest Shot's always a classic. They pulled out Al McGinnis and his classic wooden twig, and still had it. I don't know if they juiced the gun on this one, but shooting over 100 miles an hour with his wooden twig. Always great to see that. Winner, of course, Shea Weber. I think he was in 105, 106 mile an hour range to pull away with that one. Then a new competition. This was really interesting. Everyone who participated geared down, so no gear. They were shooting from like the club level of, what are they? Is it the E-Trade Center? I forget what they're calling the stadium over in St. Louis now. The Enterprise Center, I think now. Basically, from the second floor, they had one of those sauce platforms, if you will, where it has kind of like the manufactured ice or manufactured slippery thing where you have kind of in your basement you can puck handle and kind of sauce passes into your kind of like how Sidney Crosby used to do into his parents' dryer. So basically, they were saucing them off the second floor, second level of the arena and into targets that were on the ice. It was actually pretty amazing to see. And it was great to see Patrick Kane win among the boos from all the crowd. So they had like a giant gateway arch with a big net where they were basically everyone was spamming that because it was worth 10 points. A few people were missing that, and then if you made it into the goal all the way at the end on the roll, it was like worth 4 points or something. It was actually really, really neat to see. So congrats to Patty Kane winning the sauce competition. Really love that. But I think the big story here was the women's 3-on-3 game, and I think the NHL's been trying to do as best as they can to grow the women's game. There's been some disputes between the league, like two professional women's league trying to compete, and it was really great to pull the players, the USA versus Canada 3-on-3 2-period game, essentially, or 2-half game, 10 minutes running time. Great performances, great skill. Had some dipsy doozies, had some stick handling and amazing goaltending. The Canada goaltender was ridiculous. Debienne with an amazing performance. Cami Granato, I think, was former women's star coaching the American team, who really played well. I mean, Marie-Philippe Poulin always plays well for Canada, and stars like Hilary Knight and Amanda Kessel had a pretty solid game as well, but couldn't pull it off. A late goal for Canada, 2-1 goals by Johnston and Doust, and Knight having the lone goal for the U.S. So I think it was a great showcase for women's hockey. I hope they're able to grow the game. I hope the NHL takes an approach like MLS, that there's some parent clubs that own the league, and I guess take the loss on them. But you want to develop the game, not only for Olympic standpoint, but just from a women's sports standpoint as well. You really want that backing from a legit league and not have this bickering and kind of which league is the best league between. You're going to be lucky to have a league that supports women's hockey, let alone having two competing leagues. It really didn't make any sense. So hopefully the NHL makes some strides here. I was able to consolidate the leagues for the better of women's hockey in the country and in the world. So let's get to our bolts finally after kind of doing some general NHL news. And we start off in Dallas, coming off the All-Star break, coming off our bye week, kind of our second bye week of the year, right? Because we had about a week off after the Buffalo Global Series in Sweden back in November. Bolts started off pretty well. Stamkos with a goal in the second period. Then, of course, Dallas took a 2-1 lead, tying the game up in the second period. In the third period, Jamie Benn, he's one of my pet peeve players, scoring to take the lead midway through the third. Bolts were able to get one. I think it was empty net situation. Stamkos again. And then in overtime, gave up just a breakaway goal to none other than our favorite player, Jamie Benn. Bolts taking the OTL in Dallas. Both goalies stole the show there. Vassy and Bishop were basically going save for most of the game. A little bit of turnovers and a lot of, I'd say, pretty significant amount of messy play for the Lightning in the second half of that game. I think they dominated thoroughly minutes 1 through 30. But something happened. We were giving up crazy odd man rushes. It easily could have gotten out of hand if Vassy didn't make timely saves or a few good defensive plays from forwards or defensemen coming back to help out the odd man rushes. But ultimately, an even game. Nice physical game. I think this one was featured on NBCSN. Faceoffs were mostly similar. I think Dallas really outshooting the Lightning by 10. And again, Vassy holding strong in net. Strong games from Bishop and Vassy. But ultimately, Jamie Benn getting the best of us. Road trip continued over to LA. Lightning making their annual trip to California to get all three of those teams out of the way. And this game started a little bit like the game we had in Tampa, where LA took a quick 2-0 lead. They took a quick 2-0 lead here. Up 2-0 into the second period. Bolts were able to work and tie the game. Another 2-goal night from Stamkos here against the Kings. So 4 goals in 2 games at this point, right? As we're reviewing last week. Johnson getting on the scoreboard. He's been a little bit quiet this year. And always good to see Chernak adding a goal there. Stamkos getting a little empty netter with 1 second left to go. First star of the game for Stamkos. And Chernak, 1 goal, 0 assists. Pretty good defensive game. LA outshooting the Bolts. So once again, a little bit of concerns with giving up shots. Outshot by 10. Only could get 24 on a struggling LA Kings team. Physical game where both teams were in the 30s in hits. Again, faceoffs are pretty even. And really no opportunities for power play or penalty kill. Looks like the Bolts gave one up in the first period. I think they were all even strength goals in the Dallas game. Let me verify that. Yep, pretty sure they were all even strength on that. Moving on to the Ducks game. And this was a back and forth battle as well. Again, another basement dweller where the Lightning should be dominating these sorts of games. It was good to see Sorelli back on the score sheet. So Palat getting on the score sheet, opening the scoring. It ended up being 2-2 after the first period. Sorelli breaking the ice in the second, and then Cooch finally getting on the score sheet for this week, 4-2. But Anaheim gets one in garbage time with the empty netter to bring it to 4-3. But ultimately didn't get closer than that. Even on shots on this one, which I liked. Hits, Tampa Bay taking ownership of this one, hitting him by about 15. Face-offs even. Penalty minutes even. No, everything even strength for both the Bolts and the Ducks here. So, again, we've talked about the penalty kill coming a long, long way in making this team better. We were 27th the first month of the league, and you'll see down below in the stats, 4th in penalty kill and 3rd in power play. That's a recipe for success. Sorelli first star of the game for that one, and Braden Point, some really strong chances. No goals, but did assist on, I want to say did he assist on the second goal? Yeah, on Chernak's goal. Chernak, another goal, back-to-back goals for him in these games. Kuch getting a few assists, along with Stamkos on the assist sheet. And then lastly, getting to San Jose, always a tough place to play for the Bolts. Curtis McElhinney, I've been giving him a hard time all year. Is he a capable backup to give Vasi a few nights off a year? We don't want Vasi playing 60 or 70 games heading into the playoffs. And finally, a shutout from Curtis McElhinney. Really happy to see that. 30 saves for him. Absolute gem of a game. And honestly, Aaron Dell played a great game as well. I was catching highlights of this one. Tough to watch those out west games and stay up for them. But this was kind of like the Dallas game. Really back and forth between Dell and McElhinney. Backup goalies getting the start for both respective teams. Stamkos with a goal. Kucherov and Palat finishing up the scoring in the third period. This was 1-0 for quite a bit. And again, Curtis really keeping us in the game. We've given him a hard time, but his goals against average has come down as we've played better defensively. And really, he's played better. I mean, he absolutely, it's now fundamentals. He's stopping the puck. I think the Bolts are getting better at not giving up quality chances when he's in net, leaving him out to dry. There's been some interesting defensive play, to say the least, in front of Curtis, and they were able to pull it together against a shorthanded Sharks team who's really had a bad year in terms of luck and injury, man games lost to injury. So Sharks probably not a playoff team this year, ending an amazing run of getting to it, probably at least the second round of the playoffs. And of course, they're usually your Western Conference Finals team, breaking through to the Stanley Cup 1 or 2 times over the past decade. So they'll bounce back. They have the core to bounce back. So if you're a Sharks fan out there, it's okay to get 1 year off in the playoffs. You guys will be right back in there next year. So that's a great look at how last week went. Let's close up with NHL Hot or Not. A few good topics here, and then we'll kind of show what's ahead for our Bolts. Hot or Not right now, Steven Stamkos is on an absolute tear. 13 points in his last 8 games. That's 8 goals, 5 assists. He's at a plus 13. Plus 13 over his last 8 games, so that makes a big difference. Actually, let's look at plus or minus statistics for the NHL and see where he's at. That was a really big push. Getting up to plus 13. Let me take a quick look. I didn't annotate that in my prep. Right now, leading defenseman Ryan Graves coming out of nowhere with Colorado. But, as I thought, Stamkos made a big push here for plus or minus. Among the leaders here, got a big cluster of Lightning players. Surprising to see Palat up there, 26, 25. Sorelli at 24. Shattenkirk, who's been a little bit quiet lately, up at 24. Stamkos, I think, ends up with... Where are you, Stamkos? I'm trying to find... There he is at 13, so he was able to get a little bit of push there. I think he must have been hovering even. So, only 13 for Stamkos, but Lightning, 5 players in the top 10 for plus or minus. So, Stamkos, cheers to you. On the hot list for this week. On the not list for the Bolts, I think we love Patrick Maroon, but he's been struggling as of late. Thankfully, only 2 penalty minutes, which we like in the last 4, 5, 6 games. no points. Average ice time, you're looking at about 11 minutes. So making a little bit of an impact, dropping the gloves when he has to. But in terms of fantasy value or scoring value, I think fourth line's having a little bit of a tough time right now with Maroon leading the way. Kind of at the end of Hot or Not, kind of an interesting idea that's been floated out there in the hockey community for who maybe the Lightning could add at the trade deadline. We'll get to that shortly. So Patty Maroon, I expect to bounce back. So really goalie sensation out of Columbus right now. Elvis Merzlikis has been on an absolute tear. I think he qualifies now because he's played enough games and he's leading the league in goals against average. I think he's like at a 1.5 or something ridiculous like that. Let me see if I can pull that up. He's had to play with some injuries to Korpisalo. Where are you? There he is. Yeah, 1.5. Well, actually, he split time with Kivlenskis. Korpisalo going down out of injury, and then Merzlikis, right at a 2.9. He's taken the lion's share, 23 games this year, 12-7-4. He's on a tear lately. 0.67 goals against average in the last three, and basically a 97 save percentage. We talked about Matis Kivleniks, 95% save percentage. So Columbus looking good. This is a team, after losing Bobrovsky, wasn't really thought to do much. I think it's a good fit for Tortorella. Tortorella manages to squeeze something out of some tough, plucky teams. Hopefully the Bolts don't end up facing them again in the playoffs. I'd hate to face another hot goalie like Merzlikis, or even if Korpisalo comes back. Korpisalo certainly has the capability of causing problems for the Bolts. Right now, who's not hot? Ristolainen out of Buffalo. He's on the trade block. Not a lot of takers from what we've been hearing at the moment, so I think that's interesting. He's got the size. He's got a shot, but right now he is not playing well. There's been rumors that the Lightning are shopping around for another defenseman, especially with some injuries that have popped up with McDonough. And I want to say Cobra's been playing. It's Ruda who's also injured. So 2 Lightning blue liners down for the next few weeks. So Lightning might be in the market for rental defenseman. And hopefully Ristolainen can find his game. I think in his last 7, 2 points and a -6 or 8 or something like that. So hopefully again he can find his game. Speaking of trade deadline, what's really heating up is rumors for Joe Thornton to the Lightning. Wouldn't this be interesting? Joe Thornton kind of definitely on the twilight of his career. Loves San Jose, and I don't know if he would leave, but there are rumors out there that he might be on the move, and I think Tampa would be a really interesting place for him. I know Seti Paquette's been having a strong year at center, but I don't think you can turn down having Joe Thornton on your team, especially if we give him a shot to finally get that cup. Played a couple years over in Boston, but has played the majority of his career in San Jose, and I know he loves it there. He loves the team, but if he can get a shot, he's someone that deserves to lift the cup over his head, and I'm hoping if the Bolts end up with him that maybe this is the year that we can get Joe that Stanley Cup he needs for a absolutely Hall of Fame career when it's all said and done. So we'll keep you up to date as the trade deadline talks heat up. Here towards the end of February is when the trade deadline is for the NHL. And we'll probably have a special episode summarizing all that fun stuff for the trade deadline. Then lastly, not hot, St. Louis Blues are defending Stanley Cup champions, having a bad time. I think they're 3-5-2 in their last 10. They've given up basically 4 goals a game over that period. I think it's at 3.8 while only scoring 2.7. So a little bit of a struggle in goal and offensive production. Haven't looked at their injuries to see if that's contributing, but I think both Jake Allen and Binnington maybe kind of going through a cool spell there. Fully expect them to bounce back, and the Blues should be a force in the playoffs. But on my not list for this week. So as we close, what's next for the Bolts? Finally getting back home. They're going to play Vegas at home. They're going to play Pittsburgh at home. And they're going to play New York, the Islanders at home, who always find a way to give us problems, at least those pesky Islanders. Right now, though, all three teams are in playoff position. Penguins pretty even with the Bolts there at 73 points. And should be a pretty even matchup there. Not sure if we're going to face Murray or Jerry. Of course, Murray having an up and down season, I would say. A lot of criticism out of Pittsburgh. Why are you going to criticize a guy who took you to 2 cups? Not sure why. What have you done for me lately, I guess, is the mantra there in Pittsburgh. That's a tough sports crowd. Vegas right there at 64 points. Lightning should be able to control this game, especially if they can get some good goaltending from Vassy. And the Islanders always give the Bolts a problem, especially over in Long Island. Thankfully, the game is at Amalie Arena, so fully expect the Bolts to have a great game with the Islanders. That has been it for us here at the Thunderdome Puckcast. Hope you had a great episode. Great episode 11. Covered a lot. Again, don't forget to follow us. Social media, really active on Twitter. You see my Twitter handle below, Moose, at Moose_TSH. And the TSH is for the Sports Heap, which is our new YouTube channel for our vlog series and kind of our conglomerate of our sports podcast. We have 5 shows now, and we're ever expanding. Make sure to catch our next episode. Should be dropping later this week, recapping the Lightning's week against the Islanders, Penguins, and the Vegas Golden Knights. And then we'll talk some NHL action. I think we'll have an in-depth check. We're due to check in on the Atlantic Division, so our own division will have an in-depth look at that, recap some of the big NHL stories, any heating up rumors for the NHL trade deadline. We'll cover that as well. We'll keep up with hot or not, see what's going on in the world of the NHL. It's been it for the Sports Moose here with the Sports Heap Thunderdome Puckcast. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you next week with the Thunderdome Puckcast. Go Bolts!